Well, because I have a suspicion that some people will be watching this recording because we have a homework due on Thursday. That usually is a good motivator. All right. So, talking about the homework assignment, how are you guys doing with the homework assignment?
Pretty much done.
It's thumbs up. Okay, very good. But in general, how are you? Are you guys doing okay, or you need some more explanation? I think I see some heads nodding. Yep.
Is there 2 homework assignments due Thursday night?
There are 2 homework due on Thursday. So let me just go back to the homework and go ahead. Go ahead and ask.
I was having issues using the Linux.
You don't have to use Linux
I
for.
was just using it to code the C to test it.
Oh, right.
But I was having issues with the header, so I had to.
Okay, so the C code part, you can use code blocks, you can use some other means to do it, so you don't have to do it inside the Linux environment. What was I doing? Oh, right, go to the homework assignment and take a look. So I'm looking at the homework assignment from a student perspective. I think I have added myself to 310, that's right. Okay, so there are 2 homework assignments. They're both under data and number representation. The first one is the 3-bit speedy adder, and the second one is binary subtraction. So let's start with the easy one, okay, binary subtraction. Binary subtraction is a homework assignment where I want you to finish 2 tables. This is one truth table, okay, you cannot see the grid lines, but it is a table. So you have a cell here. The cell is basically saying what is 0 minus 0. Okay, don't tell me the answer. Okay, let's keep the suspense, going here. This cell is asking you what is x is 1, y is 0. So this cell is asking you what is 1 minus 0. Once again, don't tell me because I want to keep you guys in suspense. Okay, and this cell here is asking you what is 1 minus 1. Okay, fill up that table. The only one that is tricky is this one here. What is 0 minus 1 in base 2. So you might need to look it up a little bit, okay? So you do some research and thinking. This one is another truth table. It's about borrowing a flag, the borrow flag, or the borrow value. 0 minus 0. What kind of borrow do you have? Do you have a borrow of 1 or do you have a borrow of 0? 1 minus 0 goes into this cell here. Do you end up with a borrow of 1? Or do you end up with a borrow of 0? 0 minus 1. Do you end up with a borrow of 1 or a borrow of 0? And the last one is 1 minus 1. Do you end up with a borrow of 1 or a borrow of 0? In other words, you are going to fill in 8 cells, each one with a value that is either a 0 or 1. That's your homework assignment for this one. Okay?
That's slightly less daunting than the first one.
So it would seem. I'm coughing because of the coffee bean that I just chewed. Okay, so to make this easier for you, what you do is you copy. You go to your homework here, you click Add Submission, and guess what you do? You paste. Just copy and paste. The tables will be automatically pasted, and you just have to fill in the cells with the values and turn field and submit it. Make sure you click the submit when you're all done. So I'm just going to use this as an example, quite obviously incorrect. And I'll fill this one up with ones. And I'm done. Done with my homework assignment. Click Save Changes. And Moodle would let you preview your own answer. You'll click the plus sign so you can see the entire thing. If this looks right to you, you're done. Obviously, the answers that I use are not correct, so we have to actually work on it. So are there any questions about this particular homework? Okay. No questions about this one? All right. Let's work on the... Oh. Out of battery. Can't use my mic today. That's okay. All right, so the other homework, which is a little bit more complicated, I'll just go ahead and explain it and make sure that everybody understands what you need to do. All right, so in order to do this homework assignment, you have to refer back to the reading material for binary add. Okay, then if you want to derive everything again, that's okay. It's a good exercise. Okay, if you want to derive the C function and the R function and figure out which cell has which function, not a problem. I think it's a good exercise. But if you don't have enough time and you don't want to go through that process, you can just go back to the reading material. I'm going to open it up. So let me find the reading material of binary adding. So I would just open it side by side. And there are a few slides that are particularly useful for this homework assignment. And I think those are the last few slides, if I remember correctly. Okay, so this is the starting point of what is useful. We are defining what is the R function. Okay, so when you look through this whole thing, the R function is nothing more than exclusive OR. So this is how we define R, X, Y. There we go. Okay, so you want to be able to remember that R of xy, which is the result of adding a bit x to a bit y, is defined as xy bar plus x bar y. It's just, yeah.
That bar not right.
The bar means not, yes. And I think that part is explained somewhere else. So you definitely want to read the notes, and it helps to read it sequentially because I tend to sprinkle things around. Yep. The order is not important because conjunction and disjunction are both commutative. So x y bar is really the same thing as y bar x. Okay. Yeah. Well, sometimes you want to actually change the order a little bit, so it's easier to read. Okay, so this is R. C itself is easy. C is really just a conjunction, and I think it's in the previous slide somewhere. Okay, let me check slide number 4. C is just a conjunction. So, well, okay, I didn't really quite spell it out, but it is conjunction. All right, so slide 6 is the actual part that is kind of really important. Because if you scroll down on this slide here, it gives you all the equations, the starting point of every single equation. And I think it's just one more down. There we go. All right, so if you look at this particular table, yeah, it is a table. It scrolls off the screen because it's a little bit long, okay? But if you look at this thing here, it specifies the equations of all the 4 outputs of a 3x3 atom, okay? So I'll just go ahead and point out which one is which one. The first one is this guy here. This is bit 0 of the sum. In your homework assignment, this is known as Z0. The next one, what?
What did you say, Professor?
This is known as Z0 in your homework assignment. So you want to be able to look at this and look back at your homework assignment and map the two. This one is the second least significant bit of the sum. It is known as Z1, bit 1 of the sum of your homework assignment. This one here, which is getting a little bit more complicated, this is actually the beast, okay? This one is known as Z2 in your homework assignment, the most significant bit of the sum. Remember you have 4 outputs? Where's the 4th one? It's the dangling carry, okay? So the dangling carry is expressed in this way using C and R. Okay, so the next question is, well, it seems like this requires it requires that we know what is the carry of the 3rd column first, okay, in order to compute this. Because most of you can recognize that this component here, okay, this component is actually this component here. So doesn't that mean that we have to compute this first and then put it here? The answer is no. That is exactly what we are trying to avoid. So what you do is you have to expand the R and the C and do all kinds of tricks until you get what we call D and F. Okay? Can someone tell me what is D and F?
Disjunctive normal form.
Disjunctive normal form. Yes. Okay. Very good. So you need to know what is a disjunctive normal form. Okay. A disjunctive normal form, I can explain it in two ways. In one way, I can use logical operators. Okay. Basically, it looks like this. You have, overall speaking, you have a disjunction. So you have a disjunction that can have multiple components. Each component to the disjunction by itself is a conjunction. The conjunction, each conjunction can have multiple components, but each component in this case can only be one of the inputs or the negation of one of the inputs. Okay, you have 6 inputs because you have two 3-bit numbers that you're adding. So you have a total of 6 inputs. Each one of these feeding into the conjunction can be either just the input pin or the negated version of the input pin. Now, the same input, okay, let's say we're dealing with, I don't know, x2 here. x2 can be used in this conjunction. x2 can be used in this conjunction. The negation of x2 can be used in this conjunction. Okay? There's no limitation of how many times you can reuse the same input pin. It can be, you can fan out to a whole number of conjunction gates. Is that okay? But the bottom line is there are only 2 levels of gates. Okay? Because these conjunctions can all happen at exactly the same time. They are happening in parallel. So that's one level of gate. It has one level of gate propagation or time propagation. All of these results or partial results will feed into the disjunction gate, which is the second level of gate. So you only have 2 levels of gates to deal with, not counting the negation. Question? No? Okay. So that's what we want. I'll give you an example. So I'm just going to randomly pull an equation or a formula involving R and C, okay, which means it probably makes no sense. It does not relate to your homework assignment directly, but it does relate from the sense of, okay, but how do we break it up into small components? So I'm not going to give myself something that's really way too complicated, so I'm going to give myself something that's easier to deal with. So we'll have C. I'm not going to use x0, x1, x2, y0, y1, and y2 because it takes a lot more typing. So I'm just going to use A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. So I'm going to say, you know, A, B here. I'll do a or R, C, D, and then the second component. Now remember, R takes 2 arguments, 2 parameters, and C also takes 2 parameters. Okay, so you have to kind of make sure that you understand which part is which part. So now we have the second component to the outer R, which by itself is another R. That should be a killer right there. Okay, so R, and worse yet, I'm going to reuse A and C down here. So let's see how much fun we can get out of this one. Okay, what do we do first? Okay, so let's say this is the formula of one of the output pins. Does it actually accidentally match one of the output pins? Probably not, okay, you know, but by chance it does. I just did a part of your homework assignment. It's a freebie. It probably does not. Okay. Well, they all look about the same. Okay, that's the thing. All right. So you can work from the inside out. You can work from the outside in. It's up to you. But the bottom line is you want to re-express everything here as conjunction, disjunction, and negation first. That's the first thing you do. Whether you want to do it from the outside in or the inside out, it's up to you. So I'm going to work my way from the inside out. So I encounter this thing first. There's no smaller components to this CAB, which means now carry is just a conjunction. So when we write this, it is just an AB. Okay, the disjunction itself, which is this disjunction here, is re-expressed as a plus. You know, that makes it easier to write. Okay. And then RCD cannot be broken down into smaller components. I can now re-express that as a product. So now it is something plus something. And because I cannot specify the over bar in class, I'm going to use exclamation point to mean negation. So this is basically C not D or not C and then the D. Are there any questions about how I just expanded the first parameter to the outer R function? just lots and lots of steps. Okay. The second one is just RAC, and that is re-expressed as A not C plus not A and then the C. Okay. Now I have to expand the outer R. Now this is what turns it into a beast. Okay. Because when you expand a R with something like this entire thing is the first argument. This entire thing is the second component. So when you expand it like this, I personally do it like this. You can do it something else if you want to. Okay, this is entirely up to you. It's just a habit of how you do it. I do this first, and then I go back and backfill, and say that this is my. Oops. What just happened? Did it just crash?
Well, that's unfortunate.
That is very unfortunate.
Still recording though.
Yeah, it's still recording, except I have to retype the whole thing. Okay, let's see if it can recover. Mousepad, new. Okay, I just lost the whole thing. It just crashed on me. But the idea is you just expand it. Okay, you keep expanding it and expand it until you end up with only conjunction, disjunction, and negation. It will be a big mess. Okay, I guarantee you it is going to be a big mess. That will get bigger. Okay, so what you want to do is to simplify as you go. Okay, that is the key. Is to simplify as you go. I already put all those rules in the homework description itself. Okay, which is not this one. And where did I put? Okay, it's right here. So the homework assignment is right here. And in the homework assignment, I give you, several rules that you can use, tips, okay? The first one is going to be useful. Even though it looks like it's going to make things worse, it is necessary. Okay? It's called the distributive law in algebra. It's the same thing as normal algebra, except this is applied to Boolean algebra. Okay? If you have A or B, the whole thing, and C, okay, you can rewrite it as A and C, or A, B, and C. Now remember, A by itself can be a huge, monstrous formula. B, same thing. C, same thing. Okay, it's just like with normal algebra. There's no difference. Are we okay with distributive law? And then the second rule is Demorgans' Law. Demorgans' Law come in two varieties, or two. There's a flip side to it. Okay, this is the first one, which is the negation of A or B is the same thing as not A or not B. Is that okay? So when you see one side, you can transform it to the other side, and vice versa. The second form looks at the negation of A and B, and you can re-express that as the negation of A or the negation of B. Once again, A and B in this case can be a monstrous formula all by itself. So when you're negating a formula, you have to reapply this and keep doing it until you end up with no more things that you can break apart. Is that okay? Now, for simplification. So these things will bring you down to a level where you can get to DNF. But it's going to be a monster DNF if you keep repeating these steps. So what you want to do is to simplify as you go. In the same formula, okay, if you see the negated version of something and that something itself without the negation, these two in the same conjunction means false, because they cannot be both true at the same time. It works really well when A is a single variable or a single pin, but if A is a formula itself, it works as well. But you have to be looking for the negation of the entire formula and not just a part of it. Is that okay? So this is for canceling and turning something into a zero. A zero is really useful because anything and zero, false, is just false. Okay, so that's the second step of simplification. If you have something and false, it is just false. Doesn't matter what the other component is. Now remember, conjunction is commutative. even though I just write here as A0, 0A is exactly the same thing. 0A is 0. Well, the one way you can use a 0 is this. If you have A or false, it is just A. You just take the 0, take the false completely out of the disjunction because it doesn't serve any purpose. Is that okay? What about 1? What can we do with 1? 1 is true. Anything and true is just that something itself, so it doesn't really, we don't need the extra 1 in a conjunction. On the other hand, if you have 1 in a disjunction, it will turn the entire thing into true because anything or true is true. Okay, so this is how you can kind of simplify as you go. If you simplify as you go, it's not going to be too bad. You can use commutative rules. Okay, B or A is the same thing as B, or A or B is the same thing as B or A. A and B is B and A. Okay, so there are these two. And then we have some extra ones. If you have the negation of A or A itself, then between those two, one has to be true, and as a result, the disjunction has to be true as well. Okay? Any questions about this one? No questions? The last one is the one that is going to be very helpful. It doesn't look like much, but it's going to be very helpful. At least, when I did this homework assignment, it was really helpful. And then someone's going to say, yeah, when you did it, 20 years ago? No, last night. Okay, so when you see something like this, okay, which doesn't seem like it can be simplified because it doesn't work in normal algebra, but in Boolean algebra, it works wonders. When you see A or A and B, or B can be whatever, okay, B can be a very long, complicated expression, the whole thing, then you apply reverse distributive law. In other words, you undistribute it, okay? Well, that works in algebra, it works in Boolean algebra as well. So because A is really just A1, A times 1 or A and 1 is the same thing as A. So that's where this one is coming from. So you undistribute it, then you have A and true or something. But earlier we just saw if you have A or something, it is just true, right? A or true is true. So this just turns into true, which becomes A, and true, which becomes A. And you will find that this one is particularly useful because sometimes you will see a particular variable, and you have a whole bunch of conjunctions with that thing. Just compress all of them into one. If you apply this along the way, you are not going to end up with some unmanageable amount of expressions. Okay, because this one particularly will help you keep shrinking things as you apply the distributive law. You're smiling. Did you?
This is my main whole
Oh, okay. But now that you know that one, you can use it to double check your answers. Okay. I can end up, the way I did it, I ended up with 14 conjunctions. And I looked at the conjunctions for the meaning of the conjunctions. I don't think it can be simplified any further. Did anyone end up with fewer than 14 conjunctions? You don't have to worry about embarrassing me. I don't get embarrassed that easy. Don't let me? Okay. So 14 is possible. Okay, just kind of understand it. 14 is possible, and I'm not looking for the optimal answer in this class. If you give me an answer that is correct, but some of the simplification did not happen, it's a little bit complicated or more complicated than it has to be, not a problem. Okay, so don't worry, do not try to optimize your design. Okay, just make it right, make it correct. Any other questions? Questions? All right, well, if there are no questions, then we are going to move on and talk about other things. The subtraction homework assignment, by the way, is really just paving the way for another homework assignment, which is a 3x3 subtractor. I haven't decided yet whether it's going to be 3x3 or 2x2, but it's going to be one of those.
Can't wait.
And then we have multipliers and then dividers and stuff like that. Yeah, We're going to do everything by transistors, gates. All right, so that part is done. Next topic is von Neumann machine. Okay, so we are now moving on a little bit to talk about what is von Neumann. Okay, according to Ian, is it Ian? Yeah, I think it's Ian who said that. One of my students from the previous class, it is pronounced as von Neumann, not von Neumann. No, not Ian, it's John. Okay, so this is a really kind of interesting thing. You know, I always want people to look him up. Okay, how many people take a class in physics or chemistry, and when your professor talk about, oh, this person discovered this, that person discovered that, you just go like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
How many people actually look up those people and say, oh, how did that person accomplish that? Okay, well, I think you will find, you know, von Neumann actually a fairly interesting person. John von Neumann. That's him. Okay. He is interesting. Okay, you have to read his biography. Okay, but you have time. Okay, after this homework assignment, after Thursday. Assuming the next homework assignment is not really too bad. Okay. So anyway, he is an interesting person because who's Turing? Who's Alan Turing?
British code breaker.
British code breaker, you know, mathematician and computer scientist, right? He is the computer scientist. He's the father of computer science. Okay. We still study, you know, computation theory or automata theory that was derived from, you know, by Alan Turing. Who's Albert Einstein? You guys know that, right? He's the physicist who discovered the laws of relativity. Okay. So you know, famous scientists, you know, famous physicists and stuff like that. This guy is everything. Okay, look. Read his bio. He's good at just about everything. And what is interesting is all the experts within each field will say that he's the best in that field. He is that brilliant. He also worked and teach at Princeton when he overlapped with Albert Einstein over at Princeton. And they worked in the same hallway. This guy likes to play loud polka music when he works. And guess what Albert does not like? Loud polka music. And so it's interesting. Okay, just read his biography, just the wiki entry. Okay, it's really quite interesting. He passed away fairly early. Okay, so he passed away in 57, and he was only 53 at the time. Unlike Alan Turing, you know, he had no reason to commit suicide. He basically died from cancer because he participated in the hydrogen bomb project. Okay, or at least that's what most people believe that contributed to his cancer. So if this guy had lived a little bit longer, he would have contributed a lot even more to, you know, a lot of fields in engineering, math, statistics, computer science, and so on. I mean, he is really quite something. Okay, so now is a good time to talk about what is his contribution to computer science. Why is it called von Neumann architecture? What is using von Neumann architecture? What do you think?
His weights.
No. What kind of computers these days are making use of the von Neumann architecture? His idea.
All computers.
All computers. That is the correct answer. Every computer, every modern computer, the cell phone, you know, that computer, the laptop computers, the tablets, and so on and so forth, they all use what we call the von Neumann architecture. So now the question is, because you can only see von Neumann architecture today, the question is, what is a non-von Neumann architecture? What is it like before him? Okay, let me ask you another question. How do you update an app on your phone? I don't even know that because it does it automatically. No, you just say approve, right?
Yeah.
You just set it up to say, okay, yes, all further updates can occur automatically. Then you just have to charge your phone. It does everything automatically. Okay. What about earlier, before you have automated updates for apps and stuff like that? How do you update software?
Reinstall the newer edition.
you install updates, right? Okay, so you apply patches and stuff like that. Okay, do you have to open up the computer to do that? For the most part, you can just download a patch, right? You run the patch program, wait a little bit. In the case of Windows, reboot 20 times, and it will patch itself, right? Okay, that works. What about the BIOS? Okay, a lot of motherboards have BIOSes that can be updated. How do you update your BIOS? Do you have to open up the computer? Do you have to unsolder anything? Do you have to use a Dremel to file away the packaging material on your flash chip so you can change all the bits and zeros and ones? No, you just run the special program. It takes 1 or 2 reboots and you're done. Okay, right?
So you mean some kind of storage device?
No. Computers beforehand are hardwired. When I say hardwired, I literally mean it is hardwired. As in, there are specific connections from one point of the computer to another point of the computer. And how these wires are connecting components inside the computer determines how the program is run. Okay? Nobody seemed to be like going like, wow, that is kind of strange and good thing I don't have to do it now. Yep.
So we do it even now where like on the motherboard, there are switches. There's the switches that want to be
The dip switch. You're talking about the dip switch on a motherboard. That is a very, very tiny little switch that only gives you like, okay, if it has 4 positions, you can specify 2 to the 4 power of 4, which is 16 possible things. So typically, it's either clock rate or some kind of configuration. But imagine every single instruction of your computer, okay, is done by wiring, individual wires. Okay, this wire goes from here to the here. That wire goes from there to there, and the configuration of the wires determine how the program runs. How do you apply a patch in this type of technology? Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Did these computers really work off of relays? So how would they know if a relay was bad? And which relay?
Well, okay, first of all, the person who designed the computer has a master schematics of what each connection point really means, right? Then somebody will look at the desirable behavior of the computer and figure out how to wire up all of these connections. And then somebody will actually have to open up the computer and actually physically change the wiring in order to change your program.
Wow.
Yep, that's how computers were before this guy. Now, those computers are actual computers. They can compute. They actually have memory, but they only use the memory to store numbers that are being crunched. Okay, data that is being processed. That's the only way they use memory back in those days. The instructions, okay, what tells the computer how to do things, those are all done by actual physical wiring. His contribution sounds simple by today's standard, but back then, nobody thought of it. He basically thought, hey, what if we can store instructions along with the data that we're processing in memory? That became von Neumann architecture. It's basically storing not only the numbers, the strings, or whatever data you're processing in memory, but you're also storing the instructions in memory. So now, updating the program becomes just updating memory. And that is why when you have to update your apps on your phone, you don't have to open the case and tweak like some gazillion wires to change your program. So you have him to thank. That you don't have to change all those connections. Is that okay so far? Does everybody kind of understand, his contribution to computer science? Because without the idea of storing instructions in memory, and we'll still be wiring up computers. And how quickly do you think we can change and write new programs, debug old programs, and stuff like that. It'll take a long time, and you cannot even specify complicated programs because the wiring method, each length of wire has inductance and capacitance. So you can only specify programs up to a certain point, and then at some point the wires get so long and has so much inductance that it will make the computer not work anymore. Okay, so without this idea, we will still be in the stone ages of computers instead of what we have now. Okay? So that is the significance of von Neumann. All right, so knowing that that is his contribution, the next question is, well, how does it all work? Okay, how does memory connect to a processor and stuff like that? So that's the next question. So let me just open up my own notes here because I just wrote it. So all of these computers, the Colossus, the ENIAC, and all of these computers are hardwired. Okay, they perform computations faster than people can, but to change the program is a very difficult task. So this guy came along and he decided, hey, we can actually store programs in memory. And that's it. That's his contribution. So the next question is, how do we do this in computer? Okay? In other words, how does the processor access memory? And we're going to stay on this topic for a few weeks. Okay, so this is not just the von Neumann architecture. It also has to do with the control unit, which is inside the processor. In other words, we're going to look into the processor itself and figure out all the components inside the processor. Okay? Then we get a really good view of the electronics, or what makes a processor tick. Okay? That's what we'll do for the next few weeks. Are there any questions about the stuff that I have talked about so far? Questions? Okay. If there are no questions, then we're going to go on to the Logisim RAM module. Okay, this is really kind of hands-on stuff. I do prepare a slide for that topic, with explanations and whatnot. Okay, so you can read all this stuff when you have time, or you should have read it before the class. But what I'll do in class is not to just repeat what I have in my notes. I'm going to show you using Logisim and explain how to access memory. How do you read from memory? How do you write to memory? Okay, what kind of interaction do you need in order to accomplish those things? So I'm going to start up Logisim. Since everything is recorded, it's all good. And the first thing we'll do is we are just going to pick out a memory module, and these are all related to memory, but for the purpose of this class, I'm going to pick out a RAM module. Okay, and we'll zoom in so we can see the RAM module a little bit better. Okay, so this is a RAM module in Logisim. It is a fairly good and realistic representation of memory looks like for general computers. It's all good. When you hover your mouse pointer over each point, okay, it will kind of give you a short explanation of what it is. So when you hover over the A, it tells you this is the address, okay, location accessed in memory. If you hover over the D, it will show you is data, which is the content of a particular memory location. This is clear, which means when it is a 1, it will just reset all the bytes within this memory module to 0. If you hover over select, it means whether this chip is selected or not. We'll talk about why we have the selection pin. This has got the clock signal. When the clock has a transition, then the new data will actually be entered into the chip. And this is load, which controls, are we specifying a write operation? Are we changing the content of a location? Or are we specifying a read operation that we want to retrieve the content of a location on this memory module? So that gives you a kind of overview of a memory chip. When you look at the attributes of a memory module, okay, let me click it so we can see it. It only has like a few, attributes. This one, tells me what is the width of the address bus. Okay, the width of the address bus correctly change or determine the number of locations on that chip. But how many bits do we store per location is down to the next item to specify, which is called data bit width. Okay, that basically specifies how many bits are we storing per addressable location on this chip. Now it is 8 and 8 at this time, which means we have 1 byte per location because 8 bit is 1 location. That's the data bit width. Now how many locations do we have? No, because we have 8 address bits. So with 8 bits, how many unique locations can I specify?
2 to the 8.
2 to the power of 8, which is
64.
256.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now I have a memory module that has 256 locations. Each location has 1 byte, which is 8 bits. Is that okay? All right. You can change those too. I mean, if you want to change the address bus width, you can change it to 12 bits if you want. That means we have 4,096 locations. Because 10 bits specifies 1024. Multiply that by 4, we have 4,096. So now I have 4,096 locations. Each location is 1 byte, 8 bit byte. Is that okay? So I'm still controlling just the attributes of the memory module. The last portion here, which is the data interface, we don't need to change this one. We'll just leave it the way it is, which is one synchronous signal to control whether it is read or write operation, which is what the load pin is about. Okay. All right. So the first thing you might notice is you can double click on this, and maybe not. Edit content. There we go. Okay. So you can right click on it and you specify edit content. It allows you to plant values into each and every location of this memory chip. It comes in handy sometimes, okay, but right now it's not really that important. Is that okay? All right. So what we want to do is I want to show you an example. How do I specify a new value at a particular location with only one chip? Okay. So we'll go ahead and figure out how to use the address bus, how to use the data bus, and the other pins. So what I'll do is I'm going to write down what I want to do because otherwise I tend to forget. You guys can tell me what value do you want to write to which location. We have 4,096 locations right now, and each location has 8 bits. So each location can store a value from 0 to 255. That's correct. So you guys can tell me, give me a number.
42.
42. Okay, so we are writing 42 to which location?
84. 84.
84. What is significant about 84?
Double 42.
Yeah, it's double 42.
Oh, okay. So it's twice as significant as 42.
That's how that works, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we want to store a value of 42 to location 84. First thing is computers are not base 10. Okay, so we have to do base conversion. You can do base conversion into base 2, which is basically what we need to specify eventually, or you can do it in base 16, which is actually sometimes easier than base 2. So I'll do base 16. In base 16, 42 is 2 times 16 plus what? Plus 10, right? So it is in hexadecimal, it is 2 times 16 plus 10, which is an A. Is that okay? Because A specifies the value of 10, and this 2 specifies how many 16s we have because it's a base 16 number. 84 is twice that, okay? So twice of that, you can kind of do the addition if you want to. 2A plus 2A is going to be a 5. A plus A is 10 plus 10, which is 20, which has a carry, which is already taken care of here. But once you take care of the carry, you have a remaining portion of 4. So 5, 4 should be 2 times 2a in base 16. We can double check. 5 specifies 5/16, which adds up to 80. This is a 4, 84. So it does add up. Okay. All right. So now we know the bit pattern. So 2a is the content. Okay. Which interface do you think we have to specify 2a? 2. If you just look at all the interfaces here. Which one controls or reflects the content of a location, the D port, okay? So we'll go ahead and say, okay, we need to specify the value here. So what you do is you use a pin. In this case, we need a input pin to do this because we are specifying the value to that thing. And here we have an input pin. We'll change the orientation so the pin itself, the connection dot, is facing south. And we also have to change this to specify 8 bits because it has excuse me, it has to match the width of this port here. So we just make a connection like that. All right. We'll go ahead and change the values later. What about the address? The address is 54, but it is 12-bit wide, so we need another input pin that is 12-bit wide. So I'm just going to duplicate this one and change it a little bit. So drag it over here and change this to have 12 bits and connect it to the address bus. Okay, and you can see right away that location 0 is now quote unquote selected. You can see it's highlighted, right? Because the address bus is controlling which page you should flip to. That's the page number control. The D bus is controlling the content on a particular page. So one tells you which page you have to flip to. The other one is either telling you the new content to overwrite with on that page, or is asking you what is the current content on that page. Is that okay? All right. So for now, we'll just go ahead and say select is always selected. In other words, we will not deselect this particular thing. If you want something like that, you can always go to wiring and select a constant. So I just drag a constant here, which is a 1, and I connect the 1 to select. So that means this chip is always selected. Is that okay? I'm almost done. I will connect a 0 to clear because otherwise it will keep resetting the content of the memory chip. So I will pull another constant, but this time I will change the value from 1 to 0 because I don't want to clear the content of this chip all the time. Make a connection. We're good. All right, so we only have 2 pins left to specify. The one pin is called LD. LD, if you hover over that, this is the one that controls whether it's a read operation or a write operation. So I'll hover over again. It says right here, if 1, load memory to output. In other words, if this pin is seeing a 1, I'm reading from the memory chip. If it is a 0, I'm writing to the chip. What are we doing? Writing, exactly. So we want to specify a 0 to this pin. But since later on I might want to do something else, I'm going to hook up an input pin to this one so I can change it. So we'll specify a 0, but it's actually safer to specify a 1, so I'm going to turn it into a 1 before I finish the connection. All right, and this is the clock pin. Let's read what it says. Memory value updates on rise from 0 to 1. In other words, memory module is edge sensitive. Okay? It doesn't do a single thing until it sees a transition from 0 to 1 on that pin. Okay? You can exercise all the pins all you want, okay, but nothing gets done until we see a rising edge on that pin. So you can, with this one you have a choice. You can actually use a clock pin, but I'm going to use just a regular pin because then I can manually clock it, which is a little bit safer. Okay, so now we have all the pins connected. right now the chip is selected. So most of the time you don't want the chip to be selected when you're working with all the other lines. Okay, when you specify the location or the content of the data bus, you don't want to select the chip just yet because you don't want it to pay attention to something that is in transition. Okay? But in this case, since it's a constant, it's always selected. So I'll go ahead and specify the address first, okay, which is a 5-4. Oh, but 5-4 is a hexadecimal number. It is not in base 2. How do I convert from base 16 to base 2? So you guys have all memorized the lookup table because I don't see anyone flipping through the notes for the base 16 lookup table.
I didn't copy the whole thing down in my notes either.
Well, if you use it enough, you don't need it. Yeah, because I use it a lot. I mean, I've been doing this for decades. There we go. You have to pad the other 4 zeros because it's a 12-bit address. Okay, so this is going to specify the address bus. The data bus is going to be 00101010. That's my data bus content. So now it's time to just kind of flip all those bits. Okay, questions? No? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and specify the bits. And I think this is the most significant bit. Okay, so the most significant 4 bits we leave alone, and then we have 0101, 0101, and 0100. Aha, okay. Just do a sanity check for me. Can you tell from what Logicin is showing right now, did I specify the right address bus content? Looks right to me because location 54 is now selected.
Yes.
Yep, so that's good, right? Next, we have to specify the content of the data bus, which is 0010, and then we have a 1010. Okay. Okay, now red is not good. Okay. Now I know, if this class is audited by our, certain colleagues, they will say, "Tag, this is bad because this is something that people with colorblind condition cannot read. I cannot change it." Okay, the software does use color red to mean something. Go ahead.
Aren't you supposed to have that 1, a 0 in order to write it?
Right, exactly. So right now, why do you think there's a red line? Okay, let's find out. It says, error. Okay, why is there an error? It's also specifying which bits have an error. It's specifying all the 1 locations is an error. Why do you think that is the case? What do you think the memory chip is trying to do right now? According to the LD pin, it is trying to output. Exactly. But the input pin is also trying to specify the content on that particular conductor, right? On that wire. So now we have what we call a bus fight. Okay? Where one end of the wire wants to specify a 0, the other end of the wire wants to specify a 1, or something along that line. Because when you look at the memory content, what is the current content at location 54? We got 0, 0. In other words, the chip itself is trying to drive all the lines low, to a low voltage, to ground, right? But the input pins being 0011, 00101010 is trying to drive certain pins high. So now you have a push-pull type of, you have a tug of war, okay? Where the input pin is trying to change the voltage to a high voltage, and then the chip is trying to drive the voltage low. Okay, this is called a bus fight, and I'm not kidding, it really is called a bus fight. Okay. And if you have this condition inside your processor, inside any type of semiconductor, it's going to stop working. Why do you think it's going to stop working? Where one component try to change the voltage to high, and the other component try to change the voltage to low. Why do you think that is bad for an electronic device? Short? It's a short, exactly. It's a short where one is, okay, so what is the result of that short? Let me ask you that question.
A lot of heat.
Why do we have a lot of heat?
Because there's electrons that are running into each other?
Yep, there's a lot of current. Okay, very good. Because a component that is trying to drive something high is a source, is a current source, right? So we have current coming out of this pin here. A pin that is trying to drive it low is a current sink where it wants to want current to go the other way, right? And right now, according to that picture, we have a wire that is a short. Now, nothing is really an absolute short. In other words, there's always a little bit of resistance here, but not a whole lot, okay? This resistance is what ends up limiting how much current is passing through this wire. What is power? Power is current times voltage, right? The voltage, let's just say that we have a really stiff power supply and it can keep on pumping at that voltage. So I will assume that V is constant. What about I? What determines I?
The demand, which is P.
I is V over R, which is voltage divided by resistance. This resistance is not a whole lot, so we end up with a lot of current. Loss of current times the voltage drop is the power. And what do you think that power is being converted into?
Heat.
It's all converted into heat. But it's not going to be that much. I mean, this is a small transistor. This is a small transistor. So granted, we might have, I don't know, maybe 30 milliamps, here, which is not a whole lot, right? 30 milliamps is a small current. Let me put it in perspective. A rechargeable AAA cell, okay, typically has a capacity of 900 milliamp hour. What does that mean? It means at 30 milliamp of a drain, it can sustain for 30 hours continuously. So to you and I, we're thinking, that's not really a whole lot of current. Okay? My flashlight doesn't even feel hot, when it's running at close to full intensity. How big is your flashlight? Something that you can hold with your hand, right? Okay, so as small as it is now these days, it is still pretty big. You can pick it up, right? How big is a transistor? This is going all the way back to the first class, okay? How many nanometers are we talking about? 20, 30, something like that, right? So you have 30 milliamps times, I don't know the voltage drop. Let's be conservative and just say that we have half volt components these days, which doesn't exist. Okay, so we have 15 milliwatt of power dissipation. The question is over how much area? Are we talking about a flashlight type of area? No. What is 20 or 30 nanometers compared to the cross-section area of a human hair? Okay. This is where I try to be dramatic and show you guys like pictures. Dun dun dun. Yeah. Okay. Human hair, cross section, transistor. That should find something interesting. There we go. I think this is a good one. Image. Okay, it's a pixel. It's less than a pixel. Okay, that huge thing that you see, that's a human hair. The transistor, by comparison, is a single pixel. Now I can see it's really just a single pixel. I thought it was, but now I can see it. It's a single pixel. Okay, that's because of the limitation of the model, right? So now you're trying to dissipate 30 or 15 milliwatts over this much area. What's going to happen?
It just melts, right?
The genie is going to escape. Okay? The chip will blow up. The transistor will literally vaporize. The temperature is going to be high enough that that little transistor will disappear from the substrate. In other words, the computer is dead. Okay? So that's why you don't want a bus fight. Bus fight is bad because current destroys transistors. Are we doing okay so far with these things? I know this is not a physics class. It's not even an engineering class. But this is kind of the kind of important things that I think everybody should know. Okay, when you're in computer science, this is what I think you should know. Okay. So we don't want a bus fight, but we do have a bus fight because I specify this pin to be a 1. So now let's go to 0. Bus fight is gone, right? Because instead of trying to drive the D port, the memory chip is no longer trying to change those wires so that they will all be low voltage. Instead, it's now going into sensing mode. In other words, it's sampling the wires and say, okay, input pin, are you specifying a 1 or a 0 here? And that's why we don't have a fight anymore, because the memory chip is no longer driving, but the input pins are driving. Well, if that is the case, how come that location hasn't changed? Because we don't have a clock cycle. Exactly. Because remember, in order for the content to change, several conditions has to happen. First of all, clear has to be 0, because otherwise it will keep resetting the chip. LD has to be a 0 to specify a write operation. Chip select has to be a 1, so this chip is selected. And last, the clock signal has to see a rising edge transition. It has to go from 0 to 1, and that transition is what is going to quote-unquote clock in the new content of that location. So don't blink. I'm going to do it now. Ding! You guys don't seem impressed. It doesn't seem like magic to you.
Wow.
The crowd goes wild.
Can we create a program that tells the transistors of the CPU and the laptop to engage in bus fighting so we can melt it down?
We came close to that in the early days of the, I think it's the 386 processor. Okay, when they designed the 386 processor, they have a critical component where every operation has to go through that. It's I think it's the integer arithmetic and logic unit, the ALU. Okay, and the way it was designed is it doesn't dissipate heat very well, but the benchmark programs that they ran to test the chip did not have a lot of consecutive instruction that would exercise that particular ALU to make it really hot. So they passed all the tests, and it seems to run fine in a normal, popular operating system like Windows. Okay, not a problem. When people try to recompile the Linux kernel, for whatever reason, the compiler exercises that portion a lot, and the chip would overheat, and the computer would shut down. So when they recompile the Linux kernel, it would actually literally shut down the processor because of heat dissipation, or their lack. So we came close, but I personally do not know of a case where a processor can be programmed to shut itself down. That being said, there are impressive videos online that you can check out of what happens when you remove the cooling component of a processor when you're running a benchmark test program. Have you guys seen that? No? Okay, apparently I have way too much time on my hand.
We need this for learning.
You can find it on YouTube, and we'll just look at Star Wars. Okay, it's loading
Wait a second.
processor.
I wish that was in there.
Oh, it's the Lego
So
man.
funny. All dramatic walking up and it doesn't work properly.
This is the one that I think that I have seen
It has to
many
be.
times.
It has to be AMD, huh?
It has to be handy. Okay. But this is way in the past years. Go away. So it's running a benchmark test, which basically exercises the processor a lot. Okay, this is like really making it work hard. And the computer is running, the CPU cooler is sitting on the processor, but it's not attached. There's no clamping clamping it onto it. And the guy just removed it, and there you go, slow motion. But the next part is even more impressive because you might think the process has just disappeared, but instead, let me show that. It blew a hole on the table. In other words, not only is it an explosive, it's a shaped charge.
That you don't want to be on your lap when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the wrong direction. Well, the other direction is not much better either. Yep. So there you go. Well, what did I say? Transistors literally what? Vaporized. Okay? Because that's the only thing that can cause an explosion is gas, right? A really rapid expansion of gases will basically create a pressure that leads to the explosion. That's it. Now, I'm not really sure whether it reaches the temperature of plasma, but it's hot for a very brief amount of time. All right. Now, yeah, we can keep watching it forever.
We could. We have the
Keep
technology.
watching it, man. All right. So getting back to here. So do we have any questions about this? Yep.
Is there any way we can automate conversion from decimal to binary through logic?
Through logic itself. There may be a way, using some of the components, but I haven't tried it yet because I usually don't need to use a tool. If it's a long number, yes. But for smaller numbers, it's usually doable by hand. All right. So now let's go ahead and try to turn this around, and we are trying to read the location. Okay, we are going to specify. We'll plant a value at a location. We'll try to read back the content. Okay. So we'll go ahead and edit content, and I'll just kind of randomly pick a location and specify a particular value, and we'll just overtype it. Just type over, and it will change the value. 9C. Okay. So this location, which is CD 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, CD6. We want to read back from CD6. CD6. Go. All right. And by the way, if you have any special content that you're using for simulation, you can always save the content into a file. So that means the next time you start LogiSim, you can reload the content of RAM or even ROM from different files. So that way, when we get to that point to test something, this gives you a lot of the ability to specify test cases and stuff like that. It's going to be useful. But for today, it's not that useful. So I'm just going to close the window. So the first thing I need to do is to change this pin, right? The load pin. I have to change it from a 0 to a 1. And then the other thing I have to do is to change the input pin into an output pin. Because an input pin is always going to specify the content on the wire. I don't want the pin to specify the state of the wire anymore. So this is the one thing I have to do. So I'm going to change this one to it is an output pin. You can see that it now has rounded edge, which means it's an output pin. And then the second thing I have to do, well, this is all I have to do. So the other thing I have to do is to change the address, because I need to reflect the address that we are actually trying to read from. It is CD4. C is 1100, so 1100. D is 1101, 1101. And then we have a 6, which is 1100. Whoops, I forgot something. No, it's not 1100, it's 0110. There we go. So now we have a 9C, and you can see the 9C is appearing on the data port right now. Okay. In other words, as long as the chip is selected and it is in a read mode, it's being read by the processor. As we change the address pins, the content of whatever location is addressed is on the output. Okay, so that part does not require the clock pin to clock at all. It's only when you change the content of memory, then you need to use a rising edge on the clock to make it effective. Yep.
So it's being sent to the processor when it's an output. It's being sent to the processor, right?
Right. Yeah. I am basically acting on the behalf of the processor. So I'm doing whatever the processor needs to do to read the content of a single location.
And you don't have to have clock cycles to read?
Sorry?
You don't have to change the clock cycles to
No,
read?
we don't change the clock cycle. At least for this particular chip. This is a SD, it's not SD RAM, it's a static RAM, and that's the behavior of static RAM. Are there any questions about this process? What do I do to go to the next location? Change my address, right? Okay, change the address to 0111 in this case, and then read the content, and then we change the address bus to 11000 to the next location, and so on. Okay, which takes time. Okay, because every time you change the address bus, it needs time to settle. Okay, because every time you change the address bus, there's a certain delay between the change of the address bus and the correct content of the RAM chip being driving the data bus. There's a certain delay. So how do you do this really, really fast? Does anyone know what is DDR2 or DDR in general? It's dual data rate, but how does it work? It's not two at the same time. Okay, it is actually relying on a clock. Okay, now I'm not going to ask you any questions about DDR technology, but I will talk about it a little bit. It's basically having the processor and the memory chip having an agreement. And the agreement is, are we going to go into burst mode? Burst mode of operation. Reading in burst mode, writing in burst mode. Okay? If the processor says, I want to get into burst mode access, it will inform, there's a particular pin to inform the chip and say, the next 16 operations will be in quote-unquote burst mode. Now, what does that mean? It means the processor will only specify the address bus once for the start location. After that, the processor will use a particular clock and say clock, 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 clock. And for each clock, it will specify it will either read or it will write. The RAM chip is synchronizing with the processor and understand that each clock means going to the next location. And that's how we don't have to send out the entire full address for each location. And it can go a lot faster. Is that okay?
Start from like A, just go and stop.
Yep. So with double data rate, the clock, it goes like every rising edge. So there's a master clock between the processor and the RAM chip. So it just goes like, okay, write. And then it specifies the content, write. Specify the contents, specify the content and write. And it just goes 16 clocks to basically change 16 locations. And they are all consecutive locations. Okay. DDR2, what does it do? It makes use of both the rising edge and the falling edge. So now you can transfer twice as much data when you do burst mode. Is that okay? What about DDR3, DDR4, and so on? Well, they actually say something in between. So between two clocks, they say it is implied, based on the timing, it is implied that there's one more cycle here. So it can go faster and faster and faster, but it only works well when you're accessing consecutive locations. Because this is basically saying the first clock is going to take a long time because it does have to set up the address. It does have to set up all the other pins, and so it takes time. But once you have everything set up, then you can write 16, 32, 64 consecutive locations in a really, really fast way. Is that okay? That's how DDR technology works. Now you think about your sorting algorithm. What does that have anything to do with sorting algorithms? Think about quicksort. when you think about quick sort, you think about how does the algorithm access elements in an array. Is it in a particular way, like I'm always going forward, I'm always going backwards, or is it kind of like all over the place? It's all over the place, right? And what do you think it's going to do to this type of optimization? It negates it. Because every single time you want to overwrite, you're only overwriting 32 bits, 64 bits. Okay? But the processor is trying to help you by reading in the next 64 bytes, which turns out to be a waste because you're not going to use it. Now, what type of algorithm is more sequential? Sorting algorithm. What type of sorting algorithm is more sequential, but not stupid either? Go ahead. Bubble sort takes a long time, okay, so it's not a good idea.
You said not search.
Selection sort is still slow because it still has a time complexity of squared. Merge sort, okay? Merge sort is one of those things where you look at it and go like, wow, that is a really archaic algorithm because people used that back in the good old days when computer used tapes, okay? The one thing that it does really well is sequential access, okay? You start with a output array, 2 input arrays or the other way around. But anyway, the access is sequential, which means this type of burst access really helps because you're reading the first item, which triggers the burst access, right? But whatever the burst access is reading in, guess what? You're gonna eat it. So it really helps. And that's kind of interesting because if you understand the underlying principle of memory access, computer architecture, and stuff like that, you can actually differentiate sorting algorithms that in theory should be equivalent. Well, they still have the same time complexity, but since one can utilize the memory access mechanism much better than the other one, the constant associated with the complexity is now different. Yep.
The CPU's pipeline features can still come along and mess everything up, like transformation and stuff.
That can throw things off, but not this, because usually you have enough cache. One handles the or part of it handles the instructions, and the other part handles the data. The way the processor decides which part of the cache it has to kick out has to do with whether that block has been recently used. It's an LRU algorithm, so it keeps track of what is the least recently used cache piece. So when you use merge sort, it's not going to kick it out. This is going to be staying in cache because it is accessed very frequently. So it's not going to kick it out. Now the other part, which is pipelining, that depends on how you write the instructions. Do you use a lot of branching, or do you try to have a longer run of non-branching instructions? That will determine whether you have to abort the pipe, more frequently than you have to. But that's kind of like a different topic. It's kind of related to optimization, but it doesn't have as much to do with first mode memory reading. Any other questions? Now, this last part, definitely will not be in your test, but I just thought that it's kind of a good thing to mention since we are talking about memory access. Right. Well, if there are no questions, I think we are running out of time for the lecture portion. I will be at the lab in case you guys want to talk about the homework assignments. And I'll upload the video
This is how it is.
with the laptop.
Instead of me